All right, we have talked about how we decide how many representatives each state will have in Congress. We've also talked about the leadership of Congress. How is congressional leadership decided upon? Now let's talk about how Congress actually gets its work done. Once the leaders of Congress have been selected, once we know which party will be minority party and which party will be the majority party, we meet together in January and Congress is ready to go to work. The vast majority of the work in Congress is done at either the committee or the subcommittee level. That's the most active organizations within Congress are committees and subcommittees. When we watch C-SPAN a lot of times, or if we see the news coverage of what's going on in Congress, we usually see the House chamber or the Senate chamber. And we think that that's where all the work happens. And that's not true. Most of the work of Congress goes on relatively behind the scenes in these committees and subcommittees. And we need to realize, as we said earlier, these committees that have so much power and so much authority in Congress are not addressed in the Constitution. These committees, again, are entities that members of Congress at some point said we need. We need to use these committees so that we can be more efficient at doing our job. Now let's take a closer look at why these men at some point decided committees are what we're going to use. Committees allow two things to happen. Committees allow you to share the workload, and it allows for specialization. To explain these two ideas, we have to look at how the committee system works. What we do in an organization that uses the committee system is we take our overall membership. Let's say we're talking about the House of Representatives. We take those 435 members of the U.S. House of Representatives, and instead of having all 435 of those members working on the same issue at the same time, we take those 435 members and we split them up into a number of different committees. If we left all 435 members working on every issue, the only thing that could be accomplished in the House of Representatives would be the one issue that all the members are working on right now. But by taking those members and splitting them out amongst many different committees, we now give the House of Representatives the opportunity to work on many different issues simultaneously at the same time. We spread out the workload. The second thing that committees do is committees allow members of Congress to specialize. If I get elected to the House of Representatives or to the U.S. Senate, I'm being asked to vote on issues that deal with the whole country. When we passed the health care reform bill, every member of Congress, the House and the Senate, voted on that health care bill. Is every member of Congress an expert on health care? No. So we don't want people that are experts in marine fishery issues working on desert issues. We don't want people who come from rural communities working on issues that deal with urban issues. We allow members of Congress to say, my expertise is soybeans, so I'm going to work on the Agriculture Committee. Or my expertise is transportation issues, so I'm going to work on the Transportation Committee. It allows people in Congress to specialize. And what we do is we not only break members of Congress down into committees which allow them to specialize. We then take committees like the Agriculture Committee. And agriculture is a lot of different things. Agriculture is, the food stamps program. Agriculture is, issues dealing with grains like corn and soybeans and milo. Agriculture is, dealing with issues like ethanol, gasoline type products that are produced from agricultural products. So while we have this committee that deals with agriculture in general, Then what we do is we take that committee and we break it down into smaller subcommittees. So people who come from districts that do a lot of ethanol production, they can be on the committee or the subcommittee that deals with ethanol issues. And if I'm Joanne Emerson and I live in a district that's agricultural, that does a lot of grains, then I want to be on the subcommittee that deals with grains. These committees and subcommittees allow a lot of specialization. Lets a lot of work get done simultaneously, and it allows for our members of Congress to use their specialized knowledge in helping the country deal with major issues. When we look at the committee structure in Congress, the first thing we need to realize is that there are actually two different independent groups of committees. There are House of Representative committees, and there are Senate committees. For the most part, these committees work independent of each other. There's a series of House committees, and then there's a series of Senate committees. Sometimes these committees need to work together. Sometimes we will have joint committees, and we'll talk about when these committees work independent and when they work together. There are three basic types of committees in Congress. There are standing committees, select committees, and conference committees. Standing committees are permanent committees. These are committees that exist from year to year to year. And the reason these committees are permanent and they exist from year to year to year is because the issues that these committees deal with exist from year to year to year. For example, agriculture is an issue that we're always dealing with in the United States. Transportation is an issue we're always dealing with. Armed services, we're always dealing with those issues. So these are some examples of standing committees. And notice there's a House Agriculture Committee and there's a Senate Agriculture Committee. These committees work separate from each other, the House and the Senate. Okay. The second type of committee is a select committee. And select committees are temporary committees created to deal with a specific issue. When the issue goes away, has been addressed, the committee goes away. Now you can have House select committees, or you can have a Senate select committee, or you can have joint select committees. Probably the most famous select committees that we've heard of would be examples of joint select committees. The Warren Commission was actually a select committee of members of the House and members of the Senate that worked on the assassination of President Kennedy. Another example of a select committee was the 9/11 Commission. Again, this was a committee that was made up of both members of the House and the Senate, and they studied what happened on 9/11 when the Twin Towers were attacked. Sometimes the House will have an issue that they have to deal with, and they'll create a select committee. The House will deal with their issue, and after that issue is addressed, that committee will go away. Select committees don't have to be joint. They can be a House Select Committee or a Senate Select Committee. And the third type of committee that we have is what's called a conference committee. And a conference committee is a committee that is created to deal with a specific piece of legislation that has passed the House and passed the Senate. But these pieces of legislation have passed the two houses in slightly different versions. Before the president can sign or veto a piece of legislation, that legislation has to pass the House and the Senate in exact same format. That doesn't happen very often. So what will happen with a conference committee is, let's say we have a bill that deals with soybeans in the House, and it says we want $10 million worth of soybean research. And then a soybean bill passes the other chamber, and they say we want $20 million worth of research. We got two different bills. What happens is the conference committee will come together, members of the House that worked on the House bill and members of the Senate that worked on the Senate bill will come together into a conference committee, and they will work out the differences. These are the basic types of committees that we find in Congress: standing, select, and conference. We will come back and talk more about the conference committee when we talk about how a bill becomes a law. When we look at committees, we need to realize that committees are made up of members of Congress. And how do we decide which committee each member of Congress will be on? Well, basically what happens is members of Congress make a list of the committees that they would like to be on. And they turn those lists into the leadership of Congress. Now, a member of Congress needs to get on a good committee. If I want to be reelected to my position in Congress, probably one of the most important things I can do is get myself appointed to a good committee. And what makes a committee a good committee? A good committee is a committee in which I can do things for my constituents. Joanne Emerson, the member of Congress from the 8th Congressional District here in Missouri, is a very effective legislator, very intelligent individual. And I'm sure that Joanne Emerson could do a really good job in writing a law or a bill that deals with lobster fishermen. But if Joanne Emerson is running for re-election in October or November, and she gets on television and tells the people of the 8th Congressional District of Missouri, hey, I did a wonderful thing this year. I helped write a bill that guarantees that every lobster fisherman in Maine will make another $100,000 this year. What are the voters in 8th Congressional District of Missouri going to say? What does lobster fishing have to do with me, who lived in the 8th Congressional District? So what Joanne Emerson needs to do is she needs to get herself on a good committee that can help her deal with issues relating to her constituents, her district. And Joanne Emerson, from the moment that she got elected to Congress, wanted to be on the Agriculture Committee. And she got herself on the Ag Committee, and that way she could work with issues dealing with agriculture that are very important to many of the members of her district. Now, I said at the beginning of this slide that members of Congress make up a list of committees that they would like to be on, and they give it to their leadership in Congress. To be more specific, what happens is members of Congress make up a list of the committees they want to be on, and they give it to the political leadership in their House of Congress. And then to simplify the process, basically what happens is, at those caucuses that we talked about a little while ago, the Democratic caucus in the House will take the lists of all the Democrats in the House that explain which committees they want to be on, and the Democratic leadership in the House will go through the list and basically say, these Democrats have been very good, faithful Democrats. We're going to give them the really good committees. These Democrats haven't been really faithful, and maybe we need to convince them to be more faithful if they want to get on a good committee. So these committee assignments are tools that are used by the whip and the party leadership to make sure that they're doing what the party needs them to do in critical situations. Committee assignments are very important to individual members of Congress because it allows them to do things for their district. And when a member of Congress does good things for their district, they get reelected more often. Now, let's take a look at the structure of these committees and subcommittees. For every committee that there is in the House and the Senate, there are some Democrats on those committees and there are some Republicans on those committees. And the way they figure out how many Democrats and how many Republicans are going to be on a committee, it's just strictly based on a ratio. Let's say that 60% of the members of the House right now are Democrats and 40% are Republicans. That every committee and subcommittee in the House of Representatives will be made up of 60% Democrats and 40% Republicans. In the Senate, if it's 55% Republicans and 45% Democrats, then every committee and subcommittee in the Senate will be made up of 55% Republicans and 45% Democrats. Now, every committee and subcommittee in Congress also has to have leadership. And what do we call the leaders of a committee? We call them chairmen. So for every single committee and subcommittee in Congress, there's going to be a chairman. And the chairman is always going to come from the majority party. If there are more Democrats in the House than there are Republicans, then every committee and subcommittee in the House of Representatives is going to be chaired by Democrats. If there are more Republicans than Democrats in the Senate, then every committee and subcommittee is going to be chaired by a Republican. The structure of subcommittees is pretty basic. The final thing about committees and subcommittees that you need to understand is that in the past, who would be chairman of the committee or subcommittee was decided along what we call seniority. Whoever had been on the committee the longest and was on from the majority party, they would automatically become the chairman. This is a system that is still for the most part used, but it's not a hard and fast rule anymore. And the reason that we don't automatically make the senior member of the majority party the chairman is because of people like Strom Thurmond and Robert Byrd that had been in Congress, in the Senate for 50, 60 years. Strom Thurmond was over 100 years old when he left the Senate. We didn't want to make Strom Thurmond the chairman of the Armed Services Committee because at 100 years old he was not operating at the same capacity. We need the chairman of our Armed Services Committee to operate. So today, while most of the time chairmen of committees and subcommittees are the most senior members, the parties have instituted a rule where they can pick somebody who is not the senior member if they have a reason